Iowa Public Radio is your home for news, music, and culture. And the Iowa Public Radio app is your connection. Catch the latest news, enjoy music picked for you, discover something new about the state you call home. Connect to IPR, no matter where you are. Download the app for your Apple or Android device in the App Store, or visit ipr.org/app.
This is Garden Variety, a horticulture podcast from Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension and Outreach. I'm Charity Nebbe. You might call them green beans, snap beans, wax beans, or string beans, but whatever name you choose, they are a delicious and nutritious garden staple. However, legumes aren't just for eating, freezing, and canning. They also make great cover crops. Today, Dan Filius, Iowa State University Extension horticulture specialist, is going to share his wisdom when it comes to green beans and other legumes. Hello, Dan.
Hi there, Charity.
And I think we should start with kind of the conventional bean growth and use. I guess you would refer to these as cash crops.
Yes, indeed. Like the things that a person who is selling commercially would get cash for rather than a cover crop, which you would plant to invest in the soil health.
Right. Although a lot of people, of course, grow these crops and eat them as well. So let's talk about green beans, which is something that there really is a garden staple for so many. There are a lot of different varieties. Tell me a little bit about growing green beans. I know they could already be growing in your garden, but you can keep planting for a while, right?
Yeah, when I was here just a month or so ago, we were talking about succession planting, and I usually plant these 2 or 3 times in the garden and mow down my first succession so that it regrows as like a fourth or third, like the last succession, basically. And yeah, the first one can already be planted, but you can plant these on into July, and they're 50-day to maturity. So you give a little less than 2 months for them to mature, and you can keep getting them all throughout the season. If you plant it just on, say, Mother's Day, it's going to peter out pretty early. So you want to replant these to get the full the full season of production.
And when you plant beans, you also want to harvest once they're ready. You want to harvest frequently and thoroughly. Why do you want to do that?
Yeah, of course. Well, if you were to leave them on the plant, they would quickly go past. And depending on, your preference, some people do like them real small as the like a filet bean or haricot vert. But some people do prefer them to be a little bit bigger with the beans plumped up in there. But if you don't harvest them, if you let them go past, these green beans, these immature beans, are going to mature, and those seeds will become, the pods will dry out and become, they'll produce the seeds that ultimately you were planting these plants from before. And when they've done that, they're going to be the plants are essentially going to feel like they've done their job, and they will not produce more green beans. So harvesting these green beans will induce these plants to produce more green beans.
All right. And there are a couple of different kinds of plant that you can grow your beans on. You've got bush beans and pole beans. Tell me what the difference is.
Right. So we're maybe more familiar with tomatoes being determinate and indeterminate. The indeterminate ones growing long and lanky that need a lot more higher of a trellis, and the determinate ones setting a concentrated flush typically a little bit earlier than indeterminate. And the same can be said for beans, and we just think of them as bush beans and pole beans. The pole ones you're going to need to set up a trellis for. Most bush beans you don't, though some, if you're on a very small scale and you find that your beans are falling over and the beans are getting dirty or laying in the mud, you might want to set up some sort of corral for them so that you can keep them up. And this is also true, if you're in a space that is more shady, plants generally get lankier, and so that might be another reason. But beans generally succeed best when they're planted and growing in full sun.
Do you have a favorite kind? There are so many different options.
Oh my goodness. I I do like to eat. My preference is like a fillet bean, and so there are the small green beans are my favorite. And gosh, why am I blanking on the name? Of course, I like jade, not as a fillet, but as like a like tried and true green bean that's a good size. But my preference is the fillet beans.
All right. Let's talk about some other legumes. Let's talk about peas.
Yeah, these are so beans that we've been talking about are a warm season crop. Peas are one that is a cool season crop that is, fruiting already, is producing peas already. And you want to plant these pretty much as early as you can. These are frost tolerant, but not, they might suffer in an actual freeze, but you plant these in early to mid-April and they are producing peas now. And of course there's snow peas, snap peas, and shelling peas. And the same is true for all of these. And they succeed best in the spring. It's possible to get these again in the cool season in the fall, planting in, say, midsummer. But generally, I have found them to do best when planted in cool and then maturing in warm rather than planted in warm, maturing in cool.
Interesting. And do you have any advice about harvesting peas for the best results?
Keep at it. Also, this is something that you harvest these things and they'll keep producing. My favorite size to pick a snap pea, I find that if you pick them when they're pretty flat, they are more vegetal tasting. But if you wait till they're plump, but not quite, so that you can see like the ridges of each bean in the pod, that they're sweetest at that point. If you wait till they're ridged, then the texture becomes more tough.
All right. And you shared with me an interesting tidbit, which I didn't know, that some row crop growers actually will grow fields of peas before they'll put in soybeans. So because that cool season crop really gives them an opportunity to make the most of it.
Yes. So there are processing companies that like Birdseye is one of them that you'll find frozen peas in the supermarket from. Some of these companies are up in Minnesota and they rent out or they contract to grow these peas for frozen pea production on acres here in Iowa and even further south. And so a grower could rent out these acres. Frozen peas would be planted. They're not frozen. Forgive me for saying that. Peas would be planted. Peas would be planted on these acres. 50, 100 acres of frozen peas, and they would be maturing soon. And the combines, these are different combines, special combines for these peas. They just work their way from the south up to the north following the harvest, and they get them at one of the drawbacks is they have to get them. The harvest window is very short, so if it's very wet when these things are ready, the combines go, and it can rut up a field pretty good. But the rental price for getting these for renting out to these pea companies is pretty good, and so growers will do that. And then because the harvest happens in, say, mid-June, some of these growers are planting a short days to maturity soybean crop after that to double up on that.
Oh, very interesting. Let's talk about some other legumes that we can grow that may not be on people's radars. What are some of the others that you like to grow?
Yeah, well, I don't have much experience growing some of these. For instance, I don't have any experience growing yard-long beans, but these are another type of pole bean that grows, like the name says, quite long, 2 to 3 feet long. And if harvested young, these can be used like green beans. If you let them mature, they can end up being like a shelling bean or a dry bean. But there are some other beans, fresh shell beans of one variety that I know is grown kind of frequently by a lot of small growers is flambeau. So this is a bean that if you let it mature would be a dry bean that you'd have to soak to cook. But if you harvest it a bit earlier, after the beans are plumped up, you don't have to soak it because they've still got all the moisture in there. But you use it culinarily as you would a dry bean pretty much. Similarly, I know some growers are growing something called purple hull peas, and these are very similar to that. It's a southern crop typically, but I know a couple growers in the Waterloo area who are growing purple hull peas. One that I have some experience growing is edamame, and it's a soybean, but it's a different cultivar that is grown for the green pods. And you can plant a couple successions of this. First one would go in right about now, the next one in a couple weeks. And, you just, once the pods are nice and green with plump beans inside, you harvest all those pods, and then they're nice to steam and sprinkle with salt and have as a nice little appetizer.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, before we run out of time, legumes can make great cover crops. Very briefly, for people who aren't familiar, what does a cover crop do?
Yeah, so cover crops are something that you would plant in your space, covering the entire surface of the soil to do a couple things, or many different things. One, cover the soil so it's not eroding. Legumes in particular feed the soil with nitrogen. They're able to fix nitrogen from the atmosphere. They do that best if you inoculate the seeds. This is done more frequently with cover crops than it is with cash crops, but you can still do it with cash crops. And this allows you to, if you incorporate this crop into the soil, allows you to provide nitrogen for the following crop just by growing it in place. Now, some of these are terminate during the winter when it's cold. Other ones can persist through the winter. So several clovers and hairy vetch can persist through the winter and grow into the following spring. Things like sun hemp is a legume that is a hot season crop that would be grown just in the summertime and is not frost tolerant at all. And field peas is one that most people plant in the spring or it winter kills. But this is interesting because you can harvest or you can eat the tips of these. And it's almost like if you find pea shoots, microgreens, but you could grow these as a cover crop and just harvest the top of that. And they're very tasty, these pea shoot tips.
Well, and I know that a lot of people, of course, farmers use cover crops, and that number is growing slowly. But you can do that in your garden too, right?
Oh, yes, certainly. And the challenge in your garden is how you're going to incorporate this. If you don't have a rototiller, that can be more challenging. So that you might start with field peas, which are going to winter kill. Plant them in the fall after your tomatoes have petered out. Generally, September is a time when you want to plant peas, or you plant them first thing in the spring for a later planted edible crop to then, because they're really pretty easy to terminate with, say, a weed whacker or a mower.
All right. Is there anything legumes can't do? Dan Filius, Iowa State University Extension Horticulture Specialist. For more gardening information and tips, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Find out more at iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. Garden Variety is a production of Iowa Public Radio and Iowa State University Extension. It's produced by me, Erin Stile, Caitlin Troutman, and the Iowa Public Radio talk show team. For more garden goodness, please subscribe to our Garden Variety newsletter. Just go to iowapublicradio.org/garden. I'm Charity Nebbe. See you next time.